Hello people of YouTube, my name is Brad, this is my channel Adam and Orange, and welcome to the review for the Stagecoach model, the Stagecoach build from Metal Earth. This is my first of the Wild West collection, and in hindsight, what an interesting one to start with. In this video we are going to talk about this build, go over some of the caveats that I ran into, some of the problems I ran into, and basically talk about my opinion of this model. To start with, this model took about 3 hours to put together. Just a little over 3 hours, which isn't too bad for a newer Metal Earth model. A lot of Metal Earth models over the past couple of years have gotten more complicated, more detailed, and take longer to build. Gone are the days of building a model in like an hour's time. And that's okay. I kind of mention that because if I were to rate this on a difficulty scale 3 years ago, if this model came out 3 years ago and I was rated on a difficulty scale by what Metal Earth had out at that time, I would definitely put this in the medium-high range. It would be a fairly challenging model, but certainly not the most difficult thing they had. Like at the time, Iron Man was one of the very difficult models at that time outside of Iconics models for Metal Earth. Iron Man and War Machine were kind of top of the bunch, maybe some of the Star Wars models. But this, I wouldn't have ranked too high, but I would have ranked fairly high. Now, however, with a lot of the more difficult and more detailed and more challenging models that Metal Earth has put out, I would rate this as a solid medium, maybe even a medium low, because compared to a lot of the other things that Metal Earth has put out in the past, say, year, maybe even 6 months, I'd say 6 months. A lot of the things that Metal Earth has put out in the past 6 months have upped the game, and this, compared to them, is not that difficult a model. So it's interesting how that's changed. But for the most part, this isn't that difficult a model. You've got a lot of box-shaped pieces and a lot of fairly straightforward folds and shapes, but you do have some challenging areas and some unusual areas you have to put together. And the fact that it's got color on it sort of ups the challenge a little bit. One, because it can be a little more difficult to see some of the slots and tabs, but maybe that's just me. But two, that extra paint kind of thickens the metal and makes it, at least for this model, a little more difficult to work with. Now, kind of going in the order that the model was built, we start off doing this roof top piece and railings. One of the things that I did different from the instructions kind of show you putting the railings together and then attaching them to the top roof piece. I mean, the rest of the model is not even quite much of a thought yet. I didn't do it that way. I kind of put the pieces on the top and then added pieces to it and assembled the railing on the top together rather than trying to put it together and then setting it on top. I don't think that it's necessarily, instructions aren't telling you to do it that way, but they're just laid out in such a way that you understand how the railing comes together and you understand it has to attach. I don't think in situations like that the instructions are saying you have to do it that way. For me, it just absolutely made more sense. I almost ignored that fact that they show the railing and then showing it being attached. I just made a lot more sense to kind of build it on top because the railing is thin and a little frail and easily bent. One mistake that I made was trying to actually fold over the tabs at the corners, which I'm not saying can't be done. It has to be done with quite a bit of care, and I failed at that and ended up warping the railings and having to straighten the railings back out and ended up just twisting the tabs to hold it together rather than trying to fight and fold that over without folding or twisting the entire railing section. So it kind of added to my workload doing it that way. Now, might come back to this in a little bit later, but one of the things later in the build that annoyed me about the way the top is constructed, you have, not all of them, but you have several of the slots that are meant for the railings to attach are side by side, or I should say side by side, with some of the slots that attach the top to the body. I think the couple of tabs on the front are offset, but the two middle ones and I think some back ones are side by side, which I think, given the fact that they're so close together, is a bit ridiculous. So if you're going for a clean look, you're going to want to fold those tabs in, and you can't do that because right beside where the slot or the tab comes through to hold the roof onto the body. Right beside that is a railing, and you can't fold it in. You have to fold it out or twist it. One of my complaints, I might end up coming back to that here in a bit, but that's one of my big complaints with this model, is that those tabs for the railings and for how it connects would have been much better if they were offset. It still might have been a little bit of a challenge not to bend the rails, but you could bend the tab over and straighten the rail back out rather than just simply not being able to do it. And then we move on from there. We start building these like front and back sections. This back section is a large colored in kind of blackish piece here. I believe that's part 10, and the sides of it fold over and have like straps and buckles. Fantastic detail. I really love it. You've got these bits that hang down. I guess they're supposed to stay like that. Maybe they're supposed to dangle a little bit more straight down. I'm not sure. But the paint on this, I had difficulty folding over the side pieces because they flare out and you fold it down and you fold it down. I had difficulty folding it down nice and even. I didn't want to fold it, wanted to kind of curve. And one thought in my head was, is this because of the paint? Is the paint making it thicker so that it's not going to fold cleanly? Or is this done by design? Because I'm assuming this is some kind of cloth or leather cover, so it's not going to fold with the sharp crease. It's going to kind of wrap and be a soft curve or a soft corner, not a sharp corner. So maybe that's done by design, maybe that's intentional. Alright, fine. I bent it over as best I could. I left it a little bit soft looking. That's probably how it's supposed to look. Later on though, I ran into other parts that I'm pretty sure was supposed to be a crisp, clean bend that were not. So it does make me wonder if that's supposed to be by design or just a fault of the paint messing up, which I've run into that issue with one or two other models that were painted. Not all of them, but one or two others. And then on the front section, we're building to construct it. You have these US mail bags on either side, which again, I love the detail of the bags, how they look. They're rounded at the bottom. You can see the buckles on them. It's fantastic. It's an interesting way it constructs with piece, I think it's 19 and 20. 20 kind of, I think, goes over part 19. I believe that's how, if I remember it correctly. You have one part that kind of goes over the other. And I don't even think there's tabs holding it together. I think there are, but you don't fold them at that time. But just the fact that one folds over the other and there's tabs there, it holds it together. Now I didn't want to put the parts together and then try to fold the top around because I was having trouble with bending things cleanly. So I started the two bends before, got it part way done, but still left enough room to wiggle the parts, one part inside the other, and then finish the fold, which I think probably improved the final result. Had I waited, I might not be able to get tools in there to get that bend started properly. Since one of the things I would suggest doing, especially if you're noticing that you're having trouble getting the parts bent nice and clean, is that you go ahead and pre-bend the areas for the mail bags, 19s and 20, before you put them together. But pay attention not to fold the tabs that it says not to fold until later, because they do come in to play later. You move on, you do the frame piece underneath, and I can't remember if I put the wheels on at this point or not, but you've got these front pieces that have like a little arm up and a hook, and then a back piece that both sides have an arm and up and a hook, and you put a strap between the two, and I guess it's like a suspension piece for the carriage. So I'm not that familiar with old style carriages and stagecoaches, but they just kind of hook into the hooks in the front and back and either side, and then you kind of bend and close the gap in that hook carefully with your tools. I remember a similar connection on the knight, where the sword is hanging on the side and there's just like an open clasp, and you slide them together and then you pinch the clasp closed. It's very similar to that. Templar Knight it was. Very similar to that, though. I don't know if it's, maybe I clipped something wrong or if it didn't form right, but one of the four hooks didn't have, like, it didn't have the full hook like the rest of them. It was only partially there. I was still able to get it into place. I didn't have problems with it falling off, but I could definitely see where I would have had problems if it twisted the wrong way. I was careful not to turn the bottom too much until I had it more attached. Don't know if that was just a flaw in mine or if they all come that way, but watch out for that. You're going to want to do your best to close those clamps or clasps to keep the part from falling out. Just an issue that I ran in with mine, but it didn't end up being a big deal. And now that I think about it, it was the wheels. I did construct the wheels after that point. And I do remember, interestingly enough, using 2 different size glue sticks to shape these wheels, because they are really large wheels for a Metal Earth model. Usually when you're constructing some sort of vehicle, the wheels are much smaller, and you can use like a step mandrel or some small thing like a battery. But with these, with the back ones, I had to use a larger glue stick, and with the front ones I had to use my little bitty glue stick. I actually wrapped the wheel around more than it needed to be because it has a tendency to spring open, and it worked out okay. And at some point you do begin to construct the body and put all the pieces together. One thing, the instructions do indicate these side panels to kind of curve in the bottom parts, which makes a lot of sense. I think perhaps with mine I may have curved them a little too much. Should have been more subtle, or at least make the bends farther down, because it's affected the door on one side. One thing it doesn't seem to clearly indicate that later on in the build you find out is necessary is the actual sides kind of bow themselves a little bit this way. They kind of, the whole thing kind of bows out just ever so subtly along the top, along the whole thing. So it's not just a matter of the bottoms curving in a little bit, the whole thing bows a little bit on the sides. Now the instructions I didn't see where it clearly indicated that. I took a second look at the instructions on shaping the side panels, and it turns out there is actually a blue line across the top, but it's very subtle and easy to miss. When I went to put the roof on though, I had to kind of stretch open to get the tabs to line up. But even before that, there was this mid tab front and back. I had some difficulty getting into place. I think that's because, or at least partially because, I didn't have that curve in the whole length of it, that bowed bit. I just had the curve on the bottom. Things weren't lining up quite right. So you might want to, if you take a look at it, you can see the roof is not flat. It kind of curves on either side. So when you're putting the sides together, give them just a little subtle bow along the length of it, as well as slightly curving in the bottoms. Maybe not curve them quite as much as I did. Another interesting detail about this, I really love the detail on the back. I really love the detail in the mailbags, though I wish the mailbags, it says US mail on the side, but it's really hard to see, at least with my eyesight. I wish that stood out more. I love that detail. But another interesting detail is I'm guessing these are blinds. I find it interesting they're on the outside, not the inside. But there are 3 on either side. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And they're basically just rolled up metal sheets. And you don't just roll it into a curve like you're trying to form a circle. You actually roll it over itself. And that's a lot more difficult than you would think. With a piece of paper, easy as pie, but the metal resists. And it took me a lot of working just to get a little bend at a time, and my fingers would slip. I worked on those quite a bit, but I love the way they look, and I love that tiny bit of detail, and I have no problem with the amount of work I put into getting them that way. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. That is one of the parts of detail that I absolutely love about this model. Another bit of detail that I want to absolutely love, it really was a thorn in my side, I would feel safe saying the most difficult part of this build, are these silly little wonderful looking lanterns. And to get them to look as good as they do, you're gonna have to work at it. This is where an issue with things not folding cleanly really becomes an issue. I'm assuming it's because of the paint, plus these lantern sides are not solid. If you look closely at them, and I'll try to get a close-up picture, it's like an empty frame with a tiny little candle inside, so you're not dealing with much metal to hold on to. And when you go to curve, or not curve, but fold those lanterns into a square shape, they are absolutely not going to go, or want to go, into a square or rectangular shape. They're just going to want to curve and bend in whatever fashion they feel is good for that day. If you've ever felt like you've had a model not want to be a model and work against you, I know how you feel. After almost 300 models, I definitely know how you feel. But right here, I was certainly reminded. I struggled with that basically just had to give up and curl it around so that the one tab goes into its slot, because there is one tab on the end that goes in, and fold a little bit to try and flatten out the sides, then fold the top and bottom pieces in and just sit there and carefully pinch it on the sides and get it mostly back into shape. In the end, I did a fantastic job with the cards that I was dealt, and I am pretty well proud of that. It is not perfect. It is darn well close enough. It absolutely took some work to get the lanterns looking that good, because they do not want to fold nicely. Bare metal, it would be difficult because they're so thin. The fact that there's paint on them is not helping at all. But if you have the patience and you have the tools to work with it, you're going to end up with a fantastic looking detailed lantern on your fantastic looking detailed model. Get past that, you start building the side pieces, putting the side pieces on, I should say. I think the lantern actually comes before adding the side pieces. And that goes, once you get the sides on, the rest of it goes pretty quickly. Putting the roof on, well, actually putting the roof on is like the last thing. You have a bench in the middle, it's part 53, that the instructions seem to show bending the sides down at 90 degrees and setting it into place. I tried that. The tab slots are wider than the bench, so there's no way that you're going to bend that 90 degrees. It's going to work. You're going to have to flare them out just a little bit. It's not going to take much, but you're going to have to flare the sides out. They're not going to be 90 degrees. They're going to have to open up just a little to set the tabs into place to be able to twist and connect and hook them up. Now, I'm lucky, in many respects I'm lucky, but I had ordered I was ordering some magnets from AliExpress for a number of different reasons, and I think the reason I ordered these magnets are little teeny tiny, like 1 or 2 millimeter diameter, tiny little round magnets. And I think I ordered them for Hagrid's hut, because you have that little melon that sits in a wheelbarrow that just falls all over the place if you're not careful. And I think I dropped one of those magnets inside the melon to hold it on the wheelbarrow, or whatever you want to call it, so that it wouldn't fall out. But you know, you don't just order one tiny little magnet, you order a stack of them, which really isn't that big. But I'm glad that I have a stack of them, because they stack in a nice convenient stick shape. And you'll see in the build video, if you watch it, I actually put that magnet on the top of the bench and guided it into place. And I've done that before with a few other models. So I've only used like one magnet out of the bunch to hold the thing down, because they're not very strong. They were fantastic for the Hagrid's hut melon. But they also, in stick form, make a fantastic tool for putting pieces into difficult places, especially with these banana fingers of mine. And I used it for that bench. It helped tremendously. That way, with that magnet stick to guide things in, the only thing I had to be mad and frustrated about was the fact that the bench sides actually need to be flared out. But I pull it out, flare them out, try it again. Easiest thing in the world. And then, last but not least, I believe you're putting the top on. And again, I wished that they had offset the slots for the connections for the railings. I wish they'd offset those from the slots that connect the top to the body, so that it would have been easy to just fold those over. They didn't do that. Whatever, I managed. But also the fact that I had to kind of bow the sides out to get it to fit. Again, if I had known that it needed to be bowed beforehand, I maybe saved myself some trouble. But fortunately, as I was pulling on the sides to bow it out, nothing fell apart or pulled apart, which has happened in other models. So I've touched on a few things that I had some issues with, or a few things that I feel I should kind of, have you look out for with this model. But overall, even though it had some challenges with it, they weren't that big a deal. It wasn't pulling my hair out on anything. I was sighing heavily a few times, like, why does this have to be this way? But it's such a fantastic looking model. Alright, I forget all about that. I'll almost forget all about it. I've got notes here. I have to take notes, or how am I going to do this video? But had I not been trying to make a video and pay the attention that I try to pay attention to with these builds, I probably would forget about the difficulties I have with this model, unless it was brought up from someone else. How did that model go? It's fantastic. I love the color, kind of wooden slash almost caramel color. The black trim details. You've got some boxes and stuff on the top. One even has a carry handle. The lanterns, while they're a pain in the butt, they add so much detail to it. Your dual seats up here, which were a little troublesome to fold and get into place, but I managed. The mail bags on the side, just absolutely fantastic. Little step railings, which I waited until the very end to shape, because what's the point? You have what I'm guessing is a handbrake here to slow the thing down. This is, I'm guessing, the bit that the horses would attach to, because this thing doesn't power itself. I'm guessing storage space in the back. You can kind of see the seats inside and the bench in the middle. There's even latches on the door that stick off and have gold trim to them. There is a lot of fantastic detail with this model, and I'm highly impressed. Even what I'm guessing is the suspension that holds the carriage so it kind of bounces around. They even have that in there. It's fantastic. Not a whole lot to look at from underneath. There's what detail is there to put under there? It's not like it has an engine or an exhaust system or anything, but I love it. I'm really impressed with my first Wild West model. I'm looking forward to doing more. If you haven't built any of the Wild West models, but you're looking at them, you're thinking about it, go for it. If you've got a little bit of experience under your belt, you should be able to manage with this without much problem. If you're new to the Metal Earth model building, you still might be able to manage this without a whole lot of problem. Certainly reach out to communities out there. There's the Metal Earth subreddit, there's groups on Facebook, there's Instagram, there's fantastic people on Instagram that love this hobby that will help you out. There's even people out there on Twitter. I'm not as active on Twitter, but I know there's people out there. Reach out, get some help, watch my build videos. Even for a beginner, I'd say this is a doable model if you're careful and ask questions when appropriate, and just take your time and be patient. It's definitely doable. I think something inside there's got knocked out of whack, but I'll fix that later. Next up, I'm planning on doing, well, not next up, the next video is going to be the A-Wing, because I finally got and built that. But the next Wild West model, which I'm thinking might come after the A-Wing, I'm going to work on the Gatling gun. So I just recently got that in the mail. I do have one of the trains that I want to eventually work on. There's so many models, so little time, but my first entry into building the Wild West models, I'm impressed. I'm going to leave it at that. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you to my Patreon supporters for continuing to support this channel. Thank you for all of your comments. I'm sorry if I don't get back to everybody. I at least try to. There's a lot of people out there that say thank you, and it's always wonderful to hear thank you. It's always wonderful to hear that the videos has helped somebody, and while I may not always say you're welcome or thank you for thanking me, I do try to at least give like a like or a thumbs up or something on everything, just to let you know that I've read it. I greatly appreciate it. See you next time with the next build or the next news video, because that's coming up here soon. As always, keep safe. Keep yourself safe. Try to keep the people around you safe. We're all in this together. Try to try not to go out if you don't have to, and spread this. The more we can take care of each other, the better off we'll all be. Thank you for watching. As always, keep on keeping on.